Anyway, you guys have been sending in your questions throughout the course of the broadcast, and we have a few of them now, so we're going to go through them. So shall I start off with a couple of them? Somebody has wrote in to ask how many breeding pairs of hen harriers are there in the UK at the moment?
So we have roughly 775. That's what we think the estimate is at the moment. And obviously in England especially, I think it's very much down to what it should be. And I think recently there were two hen harrier nests in the Peak District where I think it was the females that went missing and the nest got abandoned. After that it was the males that went missing, one of the two. And yeah, so now we've sadly lost those two nests, which means the number is even lower. But yeah, at the moment it stands at 575.
575, yeah, exactly, and potentially fewer. Again, it's really hard to. These are elusive, secretive birds. They're ground nesting. They're quite kind of tricky to really kind of
living in hostile environments as well, out in the moors, and but we aren't going to find them all, which, to be honest, may just be a good thing too. But 575 at the moment, but obviously that number could well be less as we speak. Who knows?
Very, very much an estimate. Another one is, how big is a hen harrier?
So, as they stand, roughly, it's 48 centimetres as they stand up, and then the wingspan is not too far from a buzzard, which is 100, and their wingspan's 110 centimetres. And I suppose we kind of talk about differences as well, because that was another question, difference between hen harrier and buzzards. Obviously, male hen harrier, very slate grey plumage, almost completely grey bird, but they have a little kind of a white rump on the tail, which is very characteristic of them. And then the females are completely brown. They kind of look a bit similar to buzzards. The head shape is very different. They've kind of got a bit of an owl-like face, because they kind of hunt in the similar habitats to owls, listening out for voles. So they need kind of a satellite dish face to be able to hear. And yeah, the female hen harriers are very brown, but they also, just like the male, have that white rump on the tail, which is often very characteristic when they're quartering over a moorland or a marsh looking for voles or small birds to eat. And you'll see that white rump just flash occasionally, and it's absolutely brilliant. But yeah, kind of similar size. But yeah, the hunting techniques are very, very different to buzzards. It's that low quartering, and all of a sudden they hear something and they'll dive in and catch it. So yeah, really, really nice difference.
The females are often referred to as ringtails, aren't they?
Yes.
Because if you're below a female and you look up, they have rings on the underside of their tail, giving them that ringtail name. So yeah, sometimes a similar size, brown. The females are brown, so can sometimes be confused as well. But like you say, the behaviour is very different, and if you look out for that iconic ringtail, then that should give you an indication. And a lot of the other questions we've been getting is, where do we see them? Where are they most kind of prolific? Obviously, most of the population is up in Scotland, like I mentioned earlier, but you can see them in parts of Wales, in northern England, and even on the Isle of Man as well.
Nice.
Obviously
Mull. Yeah, really good population on Mull.
Island, all that place.
Yeah, all really good spots, really nice. And yeah, obviously very kind of like moorland habitats is where they nest, but they actually, which may surprise some people, they actually nest on the ground, which obviously not all birds do, but some don't. But that can sometimes pose a problem, can it? Especially with dogs can often disturb birds of prey and any ground nesting birds. And where I live in Sherwood Forest, this can be sometimes an issue with birds like woodlarks and nightjars. And there are sometimes laws in place keeping dogs on leads during the breeding season, which usually spans from March to about August, because sometimes birds can have, especially woodlarks, can have 2 or 3 broods. And their nesting period doesn't just go through spring, it goes into late summer as well. So it is really, really important to keep your dogs on a lead, especially this time of year. I found a lot of birds' nests in Sherwood last week, and they were all on the ground. There's birds like robins and garden warblers just very low to the ground, and yeah, a dog off the lead that's uncontrolled could easily disturb them and cause them to have a failed breeding attempt. So yeah, please watch out for that, and yeah, just be sensible when it comes to ground nesting birds. It's really important.
I mean, as a nation, we love our dogs. You just saw Nancy, who came up for a quick cuddle then. She's great, but she tears around the place like an absolute maniac. I've never seen a dog run so fast in my life. And she's just having a good time. And as much as I love her, there are certain areas at certain times of the year that they will never be off lead. It's just, it's not about restricting her, it's about protecting biodiversity. So, we do need to talk about keeping dogs on leads, to protect things. Obviously hen harriers kind of in heathland, sometimes in quite like remote areas in those places. However, all grounding birds, we've got curlew over here, skylarks that I mentioned earlier, all of this stuff is just literally around here. And I see dog walkers out all the time with dogs off the lead at this time of year. And it's something that's really, really sad, and we need to kind of get a grips with. As much as we love our dogs, we love our birds too, and it's about kind of loving our dogs, giving them freedom, but at the right time in the right places.
And it doesn't even have to be legislation. Sometimes if you do see a dog and if you feel like tearing through a woodland, like one of these two, then it doesn't have to be legislation that can stop you from saying, hey, would you mind putting your dog on lead if you feel comfortable to do so. But yeah, it can just be it can be a difficult thing, but obviously, be respectful where you can. And we can help birds and we can help all birds.
Now, there's one more question. There's one more question that's come in. 1 second.
Yes.
I have a poodle situation going on.
Fight.
Excuse me.
There we go, all good.
Sorry everyone, talking about bad dogs, there are two right there for you who are currently arguing over a dandelion. So, sorry about that. There was one question that came in about kind of monitoring and fines and things like that. Is it possible to monitor hen harrier nests with the use of drones? Now, drones are fantastic and they can be used. We use drones all the time in TV and getting amazing shots and things like this. However, drones are incredibly noisy and very, very obvious as well. So if we know where a hen harrier nest is and we put a drone up, we're potentially alerting others of where that hen harrier nest is, which could be a problem. Drones could get shot down, so economically you could lose an expensive piece of kit at the same time. And also, obviously, you have to fly it quite high above to make sure there's no disturbance whatsoever, because hen harriers on the ground, can be incredibly sensitive too. So drones are a great idea for some areas and some species at some times. But in this case, you're kind of, I think, probably more alerting, maybe the owners of a grouse moor or, people like that of where these animals could be. So it's, in that case, as good as drones can be, it's not necessarily worth the risk, I think. But it's important to have these ideas, though, and keep coming up with suggestions, because the more suggestions we have, something might come up that could potentially work and could really help. So always, if you have ideas on this kind of stuff, you can always send them in to us. In fact, you can send them into info@henharrierday.uk and keep those suggestions about conservation and everything else, including days like this, and keep the conversation going.
The more non-intrusive we can be, the better, because I think, really cool monitoring equipment like thermal imaging cameras have been so useful recently, just to monitor. I think there's a big project on jack snipe. And because obviously these are very small birds that kind of sit on the ground, and they're very hard to see unless you pretty much almost step on them. But with thermal imaging camera, you can just stand on a high point and look down, you see all these dots, and you've not disturbed them. So any way we can do that would be really good. And obviously drones might work for some species, but hen harriers, it might not be too practical. But another question I've actually got, what do you think the best time of year is to actually see hen harriers? Because obviously a lot of the time they're resident birds, and then sometimes they have these communal roosts. But what do you think, if someone wanted to see a hen harrier, what's the best time of year to go out and look, do you think?
I mean, it's when they're skydancing, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're going to go see a hen harrier, you want to see it
in its glory.
Prime.
You want to see its roller coasting
Tinder
profile, don't you?
Yeah, you want to see that. So you want to see that kind of towards the beginning of spring, towards the beginning where they start breeding and things like that. So I think spring's always a really good time to go see them. Actually, the end of summer can be good. I went at the end of summer and got some amazing sights as well, with the food passing and everything. By that time, the chicks are getting older. And and there's more kind of activity going on in that sense. So it depends, I guess, what behaviour you want to go and see. But, there's lots of ways you can kind of go and see them and go to areas, but obviously if you're going to these kind of sensitive areas and going to look for sensitive species, obviously it's important to do so respectfully. But yeah, definitely highly recommend it. What about you?
Ooh, I mean, I quite like seeing them. I've never seen skydancing, and I would love to see that. But I also quite like, I'd love to see like a group of them together. I know a friend of mine on Mull, he had a hen harrier roost last winter, and he was just stood on the road watching all these birds coming to roost, and he had like 6 or 7 all circling, all chattering with each other, and then just dropping down into a bit of willow scrub to roost. And I just thought, I'd really like to see that. It was similar to the swallows roosting in the reed beds. It's just obviously that concentration of birds all kind of knowing what they're doing, arriving at the same time every day. I just love that kind of routineness that some birds have when it comes to that. So I would quite like to see that as well, actually.
Yeah, can I come? That sounds pretty good.
Maybe.
Can I change my answer?
You've got to see a kingfisher first, and then you can come.
I have seen a kingfisher, just not this particular one at this particular